Our story begins with Hajjani and his family, and those who were going on a trip and fighting with your daughter from her, wanting the Arab market while it was there, a word from here for a word from here returned to the state. It was with its sisters, and Hajj came next to it, and an uncle here was Arab, and the world was as good as it was, and everyone was in his own situation, but suddenly, oh teacher, the Arabic coach exploded and made a scary and terrifying sound, and the Arab women were alone in the direction of the forest on a dark and scary road. At that time, the brave man got annoyed and got out of Arabic, he and Al-Hajjah, so that the couch could talk to him. Well, the decision was Malak. She was in Arabic with her sisters and flipped on the phone for a while. But suddenly her Arabic searchlights went off. All of them were malfunctions and the world became completely dark, and suddenly I heard the sound of a metallic need that was strongly conscious in the ground, and the sound of Jada as he was relieved of pain. And then along with Malak's phone, it also crashes and the screen crashes. God is in it, guys. The important thing is that the one who took the scouts came out of Arabic to look at her family, and in fact I found them an Arabic means, but they were afraid that they were terrified and worked hard to carry out and fight by calling for his education. Oh listener, the sound of scribbling on a piece of paper. But when I enlightened the scouts on what her father was, I found him unable to open a bug, and they looked behind her. At that time the girl quickly looked after her, but she did not find anyone, and when the second one was wrapped, she found the sound of the animals in the forest was what appeared, and she kept calling her family a lot, but she did not find them, so she quickly returned to her sisters, and of course they were asking her what was going on. But I sat in the driver's seat, put down the keys, and tried to turn the Arabic, but nothing happened, and the Arabic did not work, nor did the lights turn on, and all I heard around her was the sound of scribbling on the paper. But then I heard the sound of scribbling on the Arabic. At that time she and the family were very nervous and did not know. What do they do? The voice of the workers decreased more and more, and suddenly they found two strange organizations standing next to the window and talking about a big month. At that time the fire became even more subdued. All the pipers stood well, but then a moment later, what? Weird. And the blood on their clothes. When I focused a little, I found that they did not have eyes at all, and even tattooed a strange cleaner with their teeth. The yellow of everything makes sure that they are never human. When I concentrated a little, I was sure that their eyes were black and there was no shadow. I arrived inside her at the time. One of them noticed her looks and smiled too and said to her, "Can we come in, sweetheart? It's cold outside and we're alone." At that time it seemed that the horrors were ripped apart by his voice, and the two dragons were destroyed by two Arabians. They laughed with pleasure. He was king at that time. She grabbed her phone quickly, but they were disabled by the certificate. Somebody turned on the spotlight, so I tried to play Arabic types. And also, everything is idle and its shape is preferable locked up until the morning. Then she looked at her brothers and said to them, "No one is crying. Stay calm for a while and they will walk. Don't worry." But what was unseen about her was that when she turned her face, she found that the two goblin dragons had disappeared from the place as if they had never appeared at all. At that time I became more nervous, especially when I remembered their strange appearance, but after a while I heard the voice of the brave man telling her, let's go in, and we won't hurt you. We'll play with you for a while." At that time, the decision was insulted by those who were in trouble, especially since their voices, as it is inside Arabic and never comes from the Arabic door, and even Rabi and Muhammad are in. Severe, they are two stadiums of them. Then King, she opened Al-Arabia's box and came out of it like this quickly, and everyone who called it around her was confused and disappointed. Suddenly she felt that the back door had opened alone. At that time she jumped, grabbed it quickly and closed it again, but this time they found Al-Afbiyat in 4, all of them with the same shape and heart. At that time the girl came forward and screamed, maybe someone can hear her and help her, but the idiot. When Grandpa Amael sounded a little north while he was a worker looking at her with a strange smile, and suddenly he put his hand on Al-Arabia, and there was a strange wind that bore the place and all the stupidity, and the Arabia became an hour and frozen, and then she returned to her brothers and took care of her, 3 of them. They don't matter anything. To some extent suddenly of the power of freezing and air crickets Arabian, it began to break, and one of the elves descended under the Arabic laughing with great enthusiasm, and suddenly my friend the Arabic rises and fills in Arabic, and they want to turn it over to the ground. At that time Malak and her brothers, among those who are screaming and crying among the narrators in Arabic, are shaking them, and suddenly they hear the sound of something being broken, and the goblins are worried. Arabic with all violence on the ground, to the point that the goblin of the net was broken and the goblins flew at them, and Malak tried to protect Sham, and Umrah was looking around in fear, which he had not expected for only 4 civilians. When I found a person sitting on the ground hugging himself, I felt where he was covered. His eyes, she took off her seat and he came down, and suddenly he smiled and got up from his place. At that time the decision was made to do so with all its might. But the strange thing is that Hodaina moved and promised her grandfather without confusing him, and no blacks came out, nor did he even minimize the blow, but suddenly he sold it on the ground strangely. At that time, Malak takes from her sisters who gave them from the beginning of the episode and tries to reassure them. Then I took them, and they got down from the Arabian and ran in the forest until they reached the chief doctor. At that time they found a huge Arab approaching them, so they preferred a king, crying and screaming while she was, we're happy, please help us, don't leave us." Indeed, the Arabs stopped their intentions. Before she decides to choose, she faints, lies on the floor, and wakes up the next day in the hospital with her sisters, and I saw that she went to the Arab place, And unfortunately neither me nor the father nor the mother nor even any of the people she saw were king. And that's why they went and said to her, "You must have imagined that we did not find anything of what you said about her, and even your car was intact and working, and of course a queen." I was shocked, especially because she is sure that the four she saw could not possibly be ordinary children or human beings. Even these people certainly had hidden chastity. They were going to kill her and her sisters. Our second story is with Nada, who decided to travel to Japan after being offered a job opportunity for 6 months with an imaginary salary, especially since she has no family, no part, and no children. The important thing is that she accepted the job and had a residence close to the company. As such, she had no friends. She was living her life alone. But after a while all of this changed when she began to meet a strange woman wearing a mask and always standing in the same place and at the same time that Nada went to work. The important thing is that I counted the days for a whole week. The strange woman used to stand in her place wearing the same clothes and the same everything until a moment passed. She looked at her strangely because people were passing by without noticing her, as if she did not exist. She entered a place where she was very afraid of her, especially when the moment of her strange look was as if you knew her from a long time ago. Of course Nada looked at her in surprise and did not understand anything. At night she was sleeping and dreaming of her standing there on the bed and looking at her with her strange gaze. And she was not moving or speaking, but she was acting in a strange way. On the second healthy day she fell asleep, but the weather was very cold and the balcony was open, and of course this is strange because her mother's due is like a balcony, open and promise. Then she began to notice the stranger at the door. The girls laughed alone. Even the girl is going to work. I also saw her standing on the road everywhere she saw her. Of course, she didn't know who to tell me. Of course, no one will believe that she sees a strange girl everywhere, even in her dreams. But suddenly on Thursday night, it was very cold and all the streets were empty, and you walk and greet her with their guide, which is a very long job. But this time, I walked from another street. But the strange thing is that the girl was standing and waiting for her. And the first time she saw her, she began to move towards her until she came to her destination and hid. She bought a mask, and the shock was on her face. It is covered on both sides. It was clear that her face had been cut off before and her face was cut. The important thing was that she finally spoke, but there were strange and incomprehensible words, and even the girl was afraid and returned the paper like this and wanted to escape from it. But the chastity did not curse her, and she moved towards her again and said the same strange words to her. What will happen then? She also didn't understand what it meant. Is there anything biography? But I came quickly when I noticed that she was approaching her, and I actually arrived at her house, and out of fear, I closed all the doors, and the young people put down the clothes and the sweeper behind them, and stayed awake until 3 o'clock at night, when I heard the sound of a bang on the floor. The bang was increasing and regretting, as if it were being carried out with difficulty, until he was surprised. I found something. I entered from under the door, and it was a piece of paper. So I got up and took it, and it was a strange word in Korean, and underneath it was the word Jobi, and the house was so quiet that I could not pronounce it. But the next day she changed the housing she was in and stayed in a clean hotel for businessmen. But when she entered the apartment she found it small, but she didn't care about its appearance. The important thing is that the place is a little safe. The important thing is that he put a cover on Christmas and left us on the roads working, and at 2 o'clock she was going to sleep, but she heard the sound of the car and stopped at her apartment, which is strange. There was nothing else in this room, and suddenly the electricity was heating up and turning on by itself, and I heard a knocking sound, but it was not coming from the door. No, it was coming from inside the closet, and the knocking was increasing, and suddenly a scary whisper voice said, "Is something coming?" Atashishira, part of the doorknob opened, and I saw the same strange amputation inside it. At that time I came and sat next to the bed, hugging herself with a blanket, and they finished, and I woke up in the sunlight, but I was shocked by the injury that was on the ground and the carpets. Jalil hit her, full of mud. The girl said she would catch herself before she died. She booked the first plane and returned to Egypt. She did what she needed and went to the airport. I was shocked when I found her walking among the people, and the strange thing is that no one saw her or noticed her presence other than the girl. She called alone to the one who tried to ignore the issue and entered the bathroom when she found her standing behind her, and her reflection was visible in the mirrors. Suddenly she heard a terrifying crackling sound, and when she turned around quickly she did not find her at all. The important thing was that she was lucky. Her trip was postponed and she stayed in the hotel until another day. Of course she did not know how to sleep in a sober dala, but the difficulty remained like this. I found her standing in her room, taking off the Moscow and telling her, "Adaki biography." At that time I regretted that I did not focus on the meaning of the words, but I focused on the wound on her face and the stupid shape of her face, which was scary, and the blood on her face. But what was strange was when she told her, yes, at that time, I found the stage smiling as if waiting for this answer. Suddenly she pulls scissors out of her pockets, runs over her sampled shoulders and screams under her hands from the Guardian. But I didn't care, or the influence didn't rise. She threw him in her face and screamed with all her might. But she didn't care about her well-being. She laughed while she rubbed her wrist and gave her the same mark as on her bug. From the extreme pain, Nada fainted. Even today she is in the hospital and I bought them asking her about what happened, but she lies to them and knows that someone assaulted her in the street, her depraved act, and of course she could not tell the truth because no one would believe her, nor would she even be able to get rid of the wound on her face. No matter how much cosmetic surgery you have, you will have a mark, and it will never go away on your face, and you only think of it as a biography, which by the way means I will give you a wound like me. Have you ever seen anyone who eats animal meat with great pleasure? Yes, dog meat like You look like I haven't seen it. I kept seeing it, so let me tell you my story. I am the type who does not like gatherings, nor do your friends from our house at all, but my friend Sandy is the one who keeps us away from me a lot so that I can come to the party with her. After a long time I agreed, and there the world remained a claim on the other. Songs, a head, and a shower, so I didn't finish 1/4 hour, especially since my house is not far away. So I repeated walking for a while, and indeed, my friend, I started walking for a while until I found something wrong. Her voice was very loud, but I didn't care. Until a woman caught my eye sitting on the ground, heating and burning electricity on her own. I didn't care and continued on my way until I felt her body movement wasn't normal. Besides, there was a smell of blood, you can imagine, but no, there was no blood in it. There's nothing to this earth other than the dismembered body, like an animal being cut up and its stomach opened. But the shock remains that the woman eats the flesh, cutting into its organs and enjoying it. I stood in shock, unable to disengage, looking at her in horror, especially when I noticed the full-fledged children. She has all blood, she puts some meat on the floor and eats with great pleasure, and they didn't see me for a moment that I was watching her. At that time I took off my boots and began to walk comfortably and tried to get away from her without her noticing my presence, especially since she was absorbed in eating and not focused. Before I entered the second street, the owl ran into something, and this, unfortunately, made me talk very loudly, but suddenly I fell silent when I knew the disaster that I had done. I looked at her quickly and found her looking at me with her frightening help and her terrifying appearance, and the flesh was still attached to her bug and blood. I had my nose, and she was looking at me angrily because I had cut her off. Enjoy it. Her time. Try to come back slowly and I'm afraid you'll attack me at any time. But unfortunately she did not get up from her place with her hands dripping with blood and movement. But I greeted her while she was smiling. Suddenly she behaves mockingly, and she worries me when she stated a while ago that she did not finish speaking. And I ran as fast as I could. I read quickly and was filled with horror and fear. I kept running from her, trying to escape with no doubt, but unfortunately when you looked at her, I found her also running and laughing for a long time. And her hands were all covered in blood. She preferred to run after Aya while laughing. Out of fear, I fell to the ground, but I got up quickly and continued running. And after a long run I fell on the ground of who? I wish she had approached me, then I began to fear earlier, but I got up again and I said, "What do you want from me? Do you want me to be like me in my situation?" At that time she continued to laugh, a scary laugh that was never understood. Suddenly she put her hands in her bug, and part of the flesh that she had eaten and threw at me came out. At that time she fell to the ground while I was crying and her thought was killing me. But the strange thing is that she continued to educate herself while laughing with enjoyment, and suddenly she got up and walked away from me, moving coldly, not as if she were a 9-year-old child. At that time I got up from my place crying. I went back to a video that never presented the sun to what happened to me, and I repeated that I would never go out at a late time like this so that I would not see the woman. This again. Our story begins with our heroine Shahad and Azza, who were happy with each other. They were going on a trip to the mountains and also taking with them a huge car with all the things they would need and designated for night camping. They were happy and laughing, especially since the weather was nice and the world is good. But suddenly they enter from another road, and the first time they entered it, the sun disappeared and the sky darkened. This was other than the wind and rain that suddenly accompanied them in an unnatural amount at all. And of course it was difficult for them to walk on. And of course it was difficult for them to go out at a time like this. They were forced to sit in the car and eat anything, and that's it. It doesn't matter, girl, don't be angry with yourself. But Chad was afraid of sounds, strange and scary animals, especially when she felt a need moving in the forest and running quickly, and she also heard the sound of footsteps coming from behind the Arab. At that time the girl who followed her became very afraid, and she asked her owner if she had heard this sound or not, but as she was not focused and eating with a large brain, and when she noticed that Shad was afraid, she liked to play with it more, and she said to her, "Are you aware of the ghost stories told about this place? They say that everyone who entered disappeared, strange lights went into the forest, and myths about the slippery room that kidnaps people, hangs their bodies with trees, and reduces sounds. Human beings prefer to laugh sarcastically at the witnessed fear." Suddenly they find her bathroom. She entered through the window, her blood on the table. The girls had just left the dead pigeon. Suddenly they heard a frightening animal sound around them. At that time the two men were their exporters and were unable to complete them. A goat told her, "Drop it, throw it quickly out of the net, let's close it quickly." Indeed, a witness caught him with a window and covered them with blankets as they came out of fear, especially from the frightening sounds of screaming that appeared in the place. But unfortunately they were tired from traveling, so they had to sleep. But then Shahad was enchanted by Azza's frightened voice, and Amala told her, "You hear me? Blackness." Then you try to concentrate on the sound. When I concentrated for a while, there was a knock on the Arabic door. At that time, Azza held his hands and disappeared at the end of the Arabic. Terrified of the other and trying not to make any sound, and the sound of their breathing and the tanks of an album was very loud from fear. But when they looked out of the window, he had frightening eyes that looked at them. The window was not the eyes of an animal that was long and didn't move or blink, even she just looked at them. But the first time the girl spoke, the eyes disappeared quickly. 5 minutes later, they suddenly hear the voice of a strange woman calling out to them. She says, "O witness, O Azza, come sweet once to mamas." She kept calling the same strange numbers until the two girls played, unsure whose voice it was exactly. Witness spoke with fear and told her, it doesn't matter whose voice is it. The important thing is that we prefer Arabic and stay in it no matter what. Let's stay silent until morning." Here, and indeed, my friend, they sat in their place embracing each other in fear, but suddenly they find alienation injured in the Arab net. Her voice is annoying and creepy, and then on everything with a strange sound of laughter in the play very loud. At that time, the two girls were brabosicles and did not tremble with fear, until the same voice spoke and told them, "Oh Shed, won't you let me in anymore? I really love you." Strong at that time was a testimony of pride and honor, tried to reassure her after him and his cat, and many hours of screaming, giving and scribbling. Finally, everything calmed down and the sun rose again, and the two girls were sitting in their places, unable to move. Even after a while, the Arabic language was busy, and he could not help until they looked behind them, and he completely returned to him the sounds of screaming that appeared. After a while, they finally got to the main street. At the time, I honored your words with awe and told her, "It is impossible for us to come here again. We will not come here again." But then they saw the frightening humiliation with the eyes of the elite. He entered the forest, ran terrifyingly, and told them, "Will I see you again, sweethearts?" Our story starts with our battery. Xena, like her car, didn't know how to continue her path due to the rain and bad weather, forcing her to fear the forest and avoid the highway. She moved among the trees in the forest, trying to stay away from the culprit as much as possible, especially since the place was quiet and there was no one around. Actually, she felt a bit happy in the atmosphere as she loves the rain, so she took a moment to relax, almost getting a cup of cappuccino. Suddenly, another Arab entered the forest from behind the searchlights and stood right next to her in the spacious place as she was selling. Suddenly, one of the Arabs, with dilapidated clothes, a red eye, and a wound under his eyes, came down. If he didn't see it, he'd curse and walk for a while. He suddenly came back, stared at her from the window with scary looks, and terrified her when he put his hand on the window and said, "How are you, sweetheart? It is clear that your car is ready for everything. Are you going on a trip?" The girl got nervous but tried to remain calm and didn't bother him while she was working and told him, "Waiting for my friends, we will camp together for a while and come." Then she grabbed her phone so he would leave her and walk away. He did walk away, but after a while he returned and asked her, "Why don't you go out? Even the weather is beautiful. I have a lot of food with me, we can eat it together." At that moment, she rejected him and told him, "Hey, thank you, I don't need to eat. I hope you don't get upset again and stay away from me." "For you," but the old man was very cold, sitting on the bed smiling and looking at her with enjoyment, and she wanted to come out to him in any way. When the other refused, he kept blowing and smoke emerged on the bed. Then he said, "Take it easy, Masa, but you will regret it very much." Before he walked away, he lifted the bed and looked at her. Her father was walking at that time, and she did not hit her. She did not talk or fight with him because she was very nervous and afraid of him. I remained silent and made sure that all the windows and doors were securely locked. She took out a knife to protect herself if something happened. After long hours, the armored man was about to go down, but she found him next to her with the same frightening looks. He tried to skin a camel, and I was afraid of him, especially when I preferred to look at his strange features. Then I was shocked by Mastuba in his hands and the intention of the Alcazar's story. She fainted and preferred to look on her phone. She could not find him, while the criminal was standing next to her and threatening her with a brick. But suddenly there was very strong lighting in the place. It became clear that there was a large car that entered the forest. A man, his wife, and children came out of it and brought him down. I don't want to be nervous and afraid that he will attack them. The Capricorn will not have a weapon, so Repentance descends while sticking his face in the pot and saying in a low voice, "I will not leave you. He came to you again, Banana." Then he gets in his cart, takes it, and walks away. The girl still looks at him and is afraid, but the last time he left completely out of the forest and his cart disappeared among the trees. After a while the family that came made a tent and continued to sit here for a while she was still terrified, and she thanked God that she did not break the window. At that time she was killed and tied to the tree. This is the end of the one who goes on a trip alone, my friend, and that's it, my friend. Our story has ended today. We will see you in a new story, all of which are horror and movements, and don't forget to tell us your opinion in the comments and the confusion of jealous likes and strong subscriptions how our story ended today. Tell us what story you liked the most and yourself in the story about what else are you talking about. Who wants to put their name in the next video? They write quickly in the comments, and I am waiting for your comments and opinions. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that everything new will be delivered to you.